So hello all and welcome to the 2023 Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. My name is Lauren Clossy and I will be your host for this session entitled Reasoning with the Unreasonable Patron, 6 Secrets for Making It Work. This event is supported through funding from the Library Services and Technology Act grant through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Please feel free to ask questions or to make comments in the chat or interact with other attendees and the speaker within the Whova app for this presentation. And now I will introduce our speaker, Laura Greco. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for being here, everyone. We are going to talk about reasoning with the unreasonable patron. And slides going. I am going to present it from the perspective primarily of you being at work in a library. However, the information is applicable at home, in a store, really anywhere. So some of the, you can think of it however you want to, but this slide is for you. And you may be wondering who I am. My name is Laura Greco, and I'm coming to you from Pittsburgh. And a little piece of trivia about Pittsburgh is the Ferris wheel was invented by an engineer from Pittsburgh. He invented it for the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. And I learned that piece of trivia from Eric Larson's book, Devil in the White City, which is awesome. You may have all read it. But these are a few pieces of my background. I started in nursing, have a couple decades of patient care nursing in my history, and in working in the ICU and also in chronic pain management clinics, we had a lot of patients and family members who had some unreasonable behavior, and yes, they had reasons for it. I'm not judging them, but their behavior was not conducive to helping the patient. And so I got a little bit of practice working with unreasonable behavior in that setting. The garden and the lava lamp, the beautiful bunny whose name is Mango, and the pickleball are some things that help me manage my stress and bring me joy and keep me balanced. Mango really is a rabbit. He is part lion head, and he's got a beautiful 4-inch side bang on the right. It kind of blocks his eyes and makes him not look so much like a rabbit. But he's my guy. So as we get started, I want to ask you how engaged you plan on being. From 1 to 5, 5 is fully, 1 is not at all. Just take a moment and think about how engaged are you going to be during this program? Is it just white noise in the background, or do you really have something you want to get out of it? So just note your number. And the reason I ask is the more engaged we are, the more we get out of it. If we are just sitting passively, kind of watching, kind of listening, we don't get nearly as much out. So if you're spending a precious hour with me, hopefully you get something out of it. The more you put in, the more you can get out. My intention during this program is to give you kind of an overview, but also a micro view, maybe a different perspective, but helping you see both the forest and the trees when it comes to dealing with the unreasonable person. I want you to take a minute and set your intention. What do you really hope to get out of this? What would make it worthwhile being here? And ideally focus on just 1, maybe 2 things. The more you try to collect, the more information you get, the more education. If you don't use it, it becomes clutter in your head. And in order to use it, it has to be a not overwhelming amount. So that's why I'm asking you for 1 thing. What's 1, maybe 2 things that you hope to get out of it? You can jot that down. And before I get really far in here, caution that I'm not diagnosing anything. I am not referring to psych diagnoses in discussing some of the behaviors that we're going to talk about. I also don't have answers. Every situation is very, very different. We do the best we can. There is not one right way. So just that little disclaimer. I'm not telling you what is right. I just want to provide different ways of looking at a very nuanced situation. So with that, I want to ask you to jot this one down. How effective do you think you are currently at managing unreasonable behavior? 1 to 5, again, 5 is high, 1 is low, so 1 is not at all. 5 would be you're very skilled. Just jot that down, make a note. How good do you think you are right now? How many skills do you think you have? And we'll come back to that. And as we jump in, I can turn off my video and we will keep going. So unreasonable behavior can look very, very different depending on the situation. We're going to talk about emotions, specifically anger. We're going to talk about how the brain works, some tips and techniques for reasoning with the unreasonable. And I've broken them. We're going to talk about in the moment, what can you do? After the event, what can you do? And then how can you roll this back to the beginning and do some things to maybe prevent it from happening again? Unreasonable behavior comes in many flavors, and it can be from bullying, there can be negativity and complaining, micromanaging, yelling, verbal, physical, emotional abuse, and threatening behavior all fall under there. Unreasonable people may lack some self-awareness. They often lack empathy. They may harbor some anger. They may thrive in chaos and confrontation. And deep down inside, they may be feeling scared. They are also human. They have human emotions. They function basically the same way as everyone does. Bullies tend to pick on what they perceive as the weakest person or the weakest link. And the unreasonable person might be like a dam. They build pressure, they're holding emotions in, and then they either start to leak or they explode. That is what we're going to talk about. So a little bit about emotions in general. If you look at the word emotions, it could be E space motions. E is a symbol for energy. So it could be energy in motion. Energies are emotions rather, are very fluid. They are little bits of energy. Each emotion tends to have its own vibrational pattern. An emotion causes physiological changes in your body. They change the hormones, they change the speed of your heartbeat. They affect you. We all have electromagnetic fields, a biofield, and it is believed that this extends 3 to 8 feet out from our body, which can be why you feel another person's energy. If you have walked into a room and you can tell that there's tension, that there's been an argument, you are feeling someone's biofield. The love that you feel for your child or your pet, especially in their presence, that is energy. That is electromagnetic sensations that you're picking up. And if you've ever met someone and you thought, wow, I just like being around them. It feels good to be near them. That is also you picking up on energy. As we talk about emotions, we tend to use a narrow range of descriptors. We are often very general and very simplistic when we talk about emotions. We tend to talk about feeling happy, sad, angry, scared, maybe worried, but we really don't nuance that down. And that is something that I want to present, especially in terms of anger. But with emotions, you want to feel them without justifying them, and you don't want to stuff them or trap them. You want to process them and let them keep moving so that you're not holding baggage. So let's jump into anger for a minute. It's very hot and fiery. It can have many, many sources. It can be displayed differently, but basically we don't feel good being around somebody exhibiting a lot of anger. We say they're angry, they're mad. But think about what could be underneath that. Think about a time that you've been angry and what was really at the root of that. It possibly was feeling humiliated, feeling bitter or hostile, insecure, embarrassed, betrayed, shamed, frustrated, disrespected, offended, impatient, ignored, confused. What your underlying piece of that exhibit of anger is can be a multitude of things. And if you get really granular, to use Susan David's word in her book, Emotional Agility, if you get granular with that, you can have a different outcome. You don't have to stay stuck in the anger because you're not angry for no reason. There's something going on that you can address. So moving into stress, which we all feel at some point. Stress is really just our perception of a situation. How we perceive it in relation to how much control we think we have over it or how much ability we have to resolve it. So it's not the snowstorm. It's not the irate person standing in front of us. It's how we perceive that situation. And that changes over time. Things that stressed us out when we were 15, like learning to drive, going on a date, being alone somewhere. By the time we're 30, those things probably don't stress us as much or in the same way anymore because we have experience working with them. We know that we have solved that dilemma in the past and we have resources. I like to say that all stress is not bad. We tend to categorize stress as being just bad, bad, bad. There's good stress. Good stress could be riding a roller coaster, getting married, having kids, getting a promotion. These are things that we perceive as good, but they really affect our body in the same way as bad stress. And the way it affects us is we might feel our heart rate go up. We might feel our muscles get tense. We might feel our breathing change. If you're at the top of a roller coaster or standing at your wedding ceremony, we would call that excitement. If you are giving a presentation or negotiating with someone, you might call that stress. But it's the same response it depends on how we perceive it in our brain. So let me distinguish between acute stress and chronic stress because our body was designed to beautifully handle acute stress. That is when the saber-toothed tiger jumps out at us and we have to either fight or run away. Our body sends out a cascade of hormones and neurochemicals that allow us to focus on getting away. It allows us our heart rate goes up, our breathing changes, we are ready to run, our blood is shunted away from our gut to the muscles in our arms and legs so that we can run and fight. We are not digesting food well at this time because we are shunting blood away from our gut. We are prepared to basically fight or take flight, and the third option is freeze. In the other side, that's the sympathetic nervous system that gets us ready for that. And back in our caveman days, we would fight, we would run, we would take off, we would be burning energy and dissipating some of those neurochemicals, and then we would have a calm period. We'd have a feast eating the woolly mammoth or the tiger, and then things would be calm for a while until the next beast came after us. Now, in today's society, we have chronic stressors, and those look like financial problems, relationship problems, pants that are too tight, the pothole that your city is not fixing that's in front of your house, dripping faucets, an overload of to-do list items. It's the things that we consider everyday living, but they add up. Our body only knows how to respond one way to stress if we perceive it as a threat, and we keep having the same chemical hormone secreted. They don't have time to go away. We're on hold with a phone tree waiting for customer service, and we realize dinner is burning. We're getting bombarded with texts and emails and negative news. It never stops. They just layer on top of each other faster and faster. So chronic stress, we don't have a good way of dissipating that because we are basically sedentary people. Yes, you can do relaxation exercises. You can change your mindset. Those are all great. And they're excellent, actually. A lot of us don't do them, and we don't do them often enough. So thinking about your stress, what are your triggers? We each have different things that trigger us, certain situations, certain people, certain emotions, certain scents may remind us of something and cause stress. So knowing our triggers is one piece of this puzzle, because then we can sometimes nip it in the bud before we know a situation might be triggering. We can do something about it, either about the situation or about our resilience. But where do you feel your stress and how do you feel it? Begin to become aware of recognizing it as it's happening to you. Do you know what your early symptoms of stress are? Do you know what your late symptoms of stress are? Most of us know those better than we do our early ones. So do you feel stress in your head? Do you feel it in your muscles? Do you feel it in your heart, in your lungs, in your gut? How do you feel it? Specifically where and what type of sensation? Really tune in and get to know yourself and your stress. Excuse me, getting water there. So stress is pervasive. It's out there. It is our perception of the event. We all perceive it sort of similarly, but very uniquely. And knowing yourself is crucial. So I talked about the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic, the other side, the rest and digest, the relaxation side is the balancing half of that nervous system. We need both parts of that nervous system. But most of us are a little underdeveloped on the parasympathetic side. We let things come at us and we don't really have a good way of buffering them, the situations out in the world around us. So that is where your relaxation skills, your meditation, your yoga, your mindset, changing your thinking patterns, that all comes in and you can strengthen your parasympathetic nervous system. But let's jump into stress, the sympathetic. This is a fist on the screen and I want you to make a fist with it. Make that fist tight. I want to see white knuckles if I could see you. I want you to see white knuckles on your hand. Squeeze it tighter. Do what you need to make it even tighter. Hold that tension in your fist. And now let it go. You can relax your hand. What did you notice? Maybe muscle tension, maybe in your shoulders, maybe your jaws, maybe your jaws was meaning all of you. You each only have one. Maybe in your eyes, your back, your belly. Maybe you felt your heart pounding. Maybe your thoughts changed. Maybe you held your breath. I want you to think about that, your breath. It does change when we're under stress. We breathe very differently when we are calm than when we are feeling threatened. I'm going to bet that you held your breath or you strained against your breath. And the breath is one of the easiest ways to change our stress response. So think about bubbles, blowing bubbles with the wand. You dip it in the liquid and you blow. How do you blow to make the bubbles, to make the most bubbles? You blow gently and with a long, slow exhale. That is a way of breathing that can really slow down your nervous system and shift it over to the relaxation side. 3 to 4 slow, full belly breaths has been shown to get your parasympathetic nervous system starting to ramp up a little bit. And that's the relaxation side that you want. So breathing gently in through your nose and also gently out through your nose, focusing on your exhale being longer than your inhale. You can pause. You can have a little pause after your inhale or right before your inhale. That's fine, but focus on your exhale being long and slow. As you breathe this way, there's no shoulder movement. Your breath is going down toward your belly. So your diaphragm goes down, your belly should move out a little bit. Your ribs expand to the side. You're taking a nice, slow, full breath. 3 to 4 breaths like that is very common. And the beauty of breathing is it's free, it's portable, it's unobtrusive. You can do it anywhere. You always have it with you. The one drawback to breathing is we control it, and we can control it to the point where we hyperventilate. That is not good. A couple tips for that is when you're doing the breathing, have your feet flat on the floor rather. And you're focusing on the exhale. Sometimes counting your pace of breathing gives your mind something else to focus on and helps prevent the hyperventilating feelings. So you could count for an inhale of 4. You may hold it for 1 or 2, and you may exhale for 6. And this counting pacing might be not right for you or not right yet. Try inhaling for 3 and exhaling for 5. Play around with it so that you find your pace of inhaling and slowly exhaling. This technique is one you can do regularly throughout your day, sort of building your bank account of calm. It is also one you can do in that moment of dealing with the unreasonable patron. So why do we react the way we react? Because we evolutionarily have 3 brains, and we're going to go through those 3. We all have a lizard brain. It is the most primitive part of our brain, and it is involved with survival. So am I going to eat you for lunch, or are you going to eat me for lunch? My instinct to live is pretty strong, so I'm going to try to take you down before you injure me. This particular lizard's name is Salsa. He was a leopard gecko. He lived with us for 14 years. Cute little guy, did not have much going on during his day. He did not really play. He ate. He didn't have a partner, so he wasn't procreating, but that is part of the survival mechanism. He would respond or react rather to things going on around his tank. And his primary thing was he wanted to eat his meal before it could eat him. Very simple. On the right side is Mango again. So we also have a mammalian brain. It's one step up in evolution. Mammals can feel emotions. They can play. They kind of know routines. They can comfort you. They're a step up from Salsa the lizard. But they're not like we are. The bottom one is our prefrontal cortex, the part in our forehead, is what gives us the executive functioning part of our brain and makes us really human. It lets us be much more creative than other animals. It lets us rationalize and analyze. It lets us cooperate. It lets us be compassionate. And we can only access that part of our brain when we are feeling pretty calm. So the more stressed I get, I go down a level. I'm not really thinking about solutions. I'm thinking about survival. If I go all the way down to the lizard brain part, I don't hear you. I do not hear what you're saying. What you're saying does not make sense to me. I am focused on surviving. So I'm going to lash out at you either physically or verbally to make sure that I survive. So trying to talk to me when I'm extremely stressed and I feel threatened is not going to work. It's not productive. We both need to step back, take a break, maybe come back to this conversation when we're both more calm. Problem with the unreasonable patron is right in your face. They don't want to go away. They don't want to calm down because they don't see that they have a problem. So what can you do with that? Let me go back to how the brain works for a minute. Our brain doesn't like to be wrong. We like congruence. We like to be right. So if I go out in the world and think the world is a kind, beautiful place with nice people, I'm going to see that. My brain is going to focus those things in front of me so that I stay congruent. If I think I'm a nice person, I'm going to notice all the nice things that I do. If I think you're a bad person, I'm going to notice all the bad things that you do. If my brain does not like to be rejected, that triggers fear. My brain, we are wired for negativity. And that was a survival thing. We had to remember where the dangerous animals, the dangerous plants were. But we tend to latch onto negativity, even today, much more than we do positivity. You may have a day where 10 people gave you a compliment and one person lashed out at you. That one person lashing at you is the thing you're going to remember. That is what you're going to latch onto. Our brain in our head gets a lot of input from what they call the heart brain. So our heart is sending a lot of messages up to our brain. So is our gut, our intestines. That is sending a lot of messages up to the brain. So the brain is not the master controller like we always thought it was. It takes a lot of information in and then sends out directions. And the brain and the mind are separate. The mind is your thinking and your thoughts and your belief. The brain is the physical organ when I'm talking about it here. So our default mechanisms tend to be maladaptive. We tend to, when we feel threatened, we tend to go for aggression and avoiding. And those aren't problem solving. They aren't solution focused reactions. Our brain tends to react like Salsa, the lizard brain. He will react to whatever's around him. We as humans have the capacity to respond. If we can step back from our emotions a little bit, we can respond with a more thoughtful, solution-oriented response. Our brain has mirror neurons, so we tend to kind of mimic what other people are doing. You may have noticed this if you're having a conversation with a friend. If one of you leans in, the other tends to lean in. You may have noticed it if you're watching someone struggle to open a jar and you start kind of twisting your mouth and your hand at the same time. Your brain is in your brain trying to do the same thing they are doing. We can use that to our advantage when we are dealing with an irate person. If we can stay calm and consciously slow our breathing, they may be able to mirror some of that. Going back to the bioelectric field, if we can maintain a sense of calm and a sense of dignity and even love, they can pick up on that, as opposed to us latching onto their negative emotions that they're sending out. The brain also doesn't like unfairness. So as you're working with an unreasonable person, going for that fairness aspect can be a way to kind of hook them and get them on your side. Like, I'd like to work on a fair solution with you. And we'll come around to that when we're talking about the 6 secrets. But the brain likes things to be fair, likes to be included. Humans are born as social animals. We need contact with others in order to survive. And when we are feeling connected to other people, we secrete different hormones than we do if we're feeling rejected. So if you can build a camaraderie, you're going to have their hormones change in response to feeling connected to you. And I think this is an interesting side. Rejection is registered in the brain, the same place where physical and emotional pain is. And they found that even over-the-counter pain medicine helps tame some of that feeling of rejection, which I think that's amazing. So if you are feeling rejected and you have physical pain and you take an over-the-counter pain medicine, you may feel less rejected just because that part of your brain is affected. So the brain can either feel threatened when you're stressed and you feel threatened, that's what we call the bad stress or the acute stress that you need to fight or run from. But we can also change our perception of stress to, this is a problem that needs to be solved. How can I solve that? Or this is exciting. How can I enjoy this? Those two responses to a situation or possibly an unreasonable patron trigger very, very different responses in our body, and it gets our brain going down a whole different path. So I want you to entertain the possibility of looking at this as a chance to solve a problem. So back to the unreasonable patron. You really can't reason with someone who is unreasonable. Simple. But you can do the best you can. And as I go through this, I want you to think about not fanning the flames, but just trying to extinguish them. Meeting anger with anger backfires. You're fueling the fire, you're fanning those flames. It's going to explode. So I told you there were 6 secrets. Let's get into them. Secret number 1, don't ignore the situation. You can't just assume that they're going to go away calmly on their own, because they're probably not. The longer you let them be out of control, the harder it may be to get control of the situation. Be upfront and address their behavior. Go ahead and tell them what the problem is, because they might be unaware. Remember, some unreasonable people have very little self-awareness. They may have no idea that they are yelling. They may have no idea that you consider that inappropriate. So telling them what the problem is part of dealing with them. You can have a colleague just kind of move over closer to you and just stand silently near you. That colleague doesn't need to say anything and doesn't need to look threatening. Just having a physical kind of backup person there may send the message to the unreasonable person that they need to step down. May not, but it also can make you feel comfort that you have an ally. Avoid giving them the fight that they want and try not to get sucked in. So you're addressing the situation without getting sucked into their emotion. It's number 1. Secret number 2. This is so much easier to say than it is to do, but stay calm. Stay calm so that you can be sending off the emotions you want to send off, so that they can maybe mirror against you, but most importantly, so that you can keep your prefrontal cortex working. How do you stay calm in the situation? Practice helps, but breathe. You've got your breath work that you can call upon. Do a long, slow exhale. Consciously relax your muscles. When we feel threatened by this person in front of us, we tend to tense. Our eyes tense, our jaw, our neck, our chest. Our heart rate goes up. See if you can consciously relax your hands. Let your arms go limp like spaghetti. As you're looking at this person, try to separate the person from their issue. So assume it's a good person in a bad situation, as opposed to this is a bad person acting out. Try to mirror the behavior that you want shined back at you. So staying calm and receptive and dignified. Remember that their rant is not about you. This is not them against you. It's them against something, and you just happen to be representing it. Try to pause and respond to them as opposed to reacting. Their anger and their chaos is going to be easy to suck you in. It's easy to feel sucked into that. So you're going to try to put a little distance between you and responding to their chaos. Try looking at their situation or this situation and them from many different perspectives. Try not to misinterpret you really don't know exactly what's going on with them. You can notice that you have emotions in this also, and notice your emotions, name your emotions, instead of jumping to reacting to your emotions. And some of this staying calm goes back to self-care that you need to have started yesterday. So we all need to be well rested, well fed, with nutritious food, have movement in our day. If we are chronically fatigued, hungry, malnourished because we're not eating real food and not rested, we aren't our best selves. It's really hard to stay in my prefrontal cortex and be the best version of myself if I have stress going on in my body. So self-care, and that includes relaxation, that includes time with friends, that includes a lot of things that we say we don't have time for. Your hobbies, tribe, knowing your purpose, your contributions, feeling like they're received in the world. That is all part of the backstory of how we can present ourselves as being calm. Secret number 3. Go beige. By this, I mean, be neutral. You want to look and sound as neutral as possible. So your, excuse me, your nonverbals and your verbals need to be non-inflammatory. Have a neutral face. You don't want to smile because they could read that as you're mocking them. You don't want to look angry and clench your jaw and squint your eyes at them because that can trigger them. Your posture, your hands on your hips could look threatening. Arms crossed in front of you could look like you don't want to work with them. Try to be as neutral and dignified and pleasantly beige as you can. As you're doing this, try in your mind being soft on the person and tough on the issue. So you've got your heels dug into sticking to your boundaries and your solution focused, but your posture, your face is all going to look gentle toward the unreasonable person. And there's a fine line as you do this between sympathetic listening and getting sucked in. So be careful that you're not nodding and that it looks like you're agreeing with them and you're encouraging them. As you're trying to stay beige and strong, think of how a tree blows in the wind. A tree can handle a fair amount of wind without snapping. And it just, mentally, you can stay flexible like the tree in the wind. Your job is here bringing maturity and grace and your prefrontal cortex to the situation so that they can hopefully pull from you. Secret number 4 is lead the conversation as opposed to following their lead. You don't want to go where they're going. They are in chaos. They are in anger. They are not thinking. They're in their lizard brain. You don't want to be there. If you are just reacting to and following their lead, that gives them control. And you want to have the control of the conversation. You're going to point out that what the problem is, and you're going to set limits and boundaries on how you will talk to them and what the limits are of what you can or will talk about. The boundaries help you feel shored up for this. It also helps control some of their chaos. You may want to, as you're leading the conversation, ask them questions and focus on solutions. You're going to steer them toward a solution. So you could ask them for their ideas for some possible solutions. Let them know that you want to work with them. You want to ally with them because that is calming to their brain. They don't want the rejection. They don't want the isolation. You may have some ideas in your head of what the solution could be. Try to be open and flexible because they may present something that isn't close to what you're thinking, but how can you keep partnering with them and keep working toward it? As you're talking to them, can you make it a we as opposed to an I and a you? as they are spewing themselves out at you, try to think like a boxer or a martial arts person, how they deflect the blow coming at them. They kind of move and let that blow pass them so that it loses its energy. That is how you want to work with them. If you fight back and get in their face and yell, that's just adding power. They can take that power and throw it right back at you, and it keeps escalating. You can ask them why they think your request or the library policy seems unreasonable to them. And then as they're talking about that, it kind of can give you a clue as to what their underlying issue really is. What they're saying is probably not the primary problem that they're having, and you need to dig a little bit deeper. They have a hidden need to work on. As you are leading the conversation, remember that if they are still stuck in their lizard brain, they're not going to hear anything you say. So all the rationalizations, reading the rules, explaining things is not going to help them right now. They're beyond it or not up to it. Secret number 5, as you work with them, try to find a single point you agree on. And this can be really hard. Because you might not agree with anything of them. But as you dig down, try to find the nugget of good down in the bottom of their soul, and that's what you can agree on. Maybe they come in and they want you to ban certain books. And how could you twist that into making it something you agree on when you don't think any of the books should be banned? Maybe we both want to provide appropriate reading material. You've partnered. We have a mutual goal of appropriate reading material. You're not going to define that in the here and now. You just want them partnered with you. Try to acknowledge their good intentions. It lets them feel heard, and it can catch them off guard and sort of disarm them. You have the book banning person. You want appropriate reading material for your neighbors and loved ones. Yes, they do. It just has a very different definition of yours, but they feel heard. You want them to try to feel heard. Your brain likes to be right. If they can hear themselves agree with you, they're more likely to work with you because their brain likes congruence. So if they said that, yes, I do want appropriate reading material, and you've agreed, yes, I want appropriate reading material, they've heard that agreement, and then they are going to be more likely to work on it and make it happen, because they don't want to be incongruent and backpedal and say, well, that's not what I said. That's not what I meant. Although they might, they very well might. Just keep trying to find a single thing that you agree on. Secret 6 is focusing on a solution. And I've mentioned this a lot. It is probably the part where a lot of people don't succeed well. Because we want to throw things back at them and we want to feel right and say, no, this is a policy, this is what I believe, this is right. Just focus on a solution instead of holding up all the barriers. They have a hidden need. If you can figure out what that is, go with it. You may say, let's try to solve this, or I'd like to work together to come up with something. As you and they start focusing on a solution, your brain changes. You've got different chemicals going on in your body. They become less reactionary. If you are focused on them and their chaos as opposed to a solution, you are feeding that fire over and over and over. Let me jump back into just to finding a single point that you agree on. Way back when, this was a story from North Carolina, actually, in the ICU, had a patient who was in the ICU. He'd had major belly surgery. And this was back in the day when you stayed a couple days in the ICU and then you went to the floor for a couple days and then you went home. And the first night that he was in the ICU, he was on a ventilator, so the machine was breathing for him. We could give him as much pain medicine as we could, because the pain medicine could cause him to lose his drive to breathe, but he was on the ventilator, so he was going to be ventilated no matter what. Painful surgery, but the next morning, the breathing tube came out, which is part of the process. You breathe on your own, you get good at that, you move out to the floor, and then eventually home. He was raising such a ruckus all day long, complaining about he wanted more pain medicine. He was going to sue because we weren't managing his pain. People were yelling back at him, and he became the problem patient. I was working nights. I came into chaos in that room, but explained to him that if we gave him the pain medicine, he would not be able to breathe well. And so the solution, the point that we agreed on was he wanted to go home. And I wanted him to be able to go home. We all wanted him to be able to go home. So once he knew that we were working on the same thing, we created a solution, and he worked harder on managing his pain in non-medication ways. He got medication, but not as much as he wanted. But when he understood that if he got more medication, it could delay him in going home, and he'd go back on the breathing machine, which he hated, he was a lot more cooperative. And he did his breathing exercises, which hurt, but are part of him going home. So we found a solution by kind of partnering on looking at the same goal. Not necessarily easy, but if you can find that commonality, it takes you pretty far. So things you might say as you are working with them is ask them what they're upset about. You can ask them why your request seems unreasonable. You can say, I'm sorry, or I'm going to try to fix this. Ideally, don't say something that you can't do. You can apologize for the situation without it being your fault. Sometimes them just hearing I'm sorry is enough to tone them down or calm them down. When I worked in the pain management clinic, we were often running behind. It was a multi-doctor clinic. The waiting room was full because everyone seemed to bring all of their relatives when they came here. And everyone was annoyed because they were waiting in the waiting room longer past their scheduled time. I remember going out there, it was like a twice a day thing at least, apologizing to people. I apologized for the delay. And one man said to me, why are you apologizing? It's not you who's running late. And I said, I'm just apologizing on behalf of our process that isn't working today. And he's like, oh, okay, I feel better then. I thought, whoa, that was way easier than I thought it would be. So I kept on going out every day and apologizing. And sometimes that can work. I'm sorry that you're waiting. I'm sorry that you're frustrated out here. Helped. As you're working with them, and I hinted at this earlier, try to see another perspective. We tend to either see the big picture, the forest, or the trees, the nitty gritty, what's right in front of my face right now. But as another perspective, could the person yelling just be hard of hearing? Do they even know they're yelling? Could they be in pain? Could they have different sensory triggers? Could they be scared? Could they be unaware? A lot of people have very low emotional intelligence. They may have no idea what they look like to other people. And then there's always the person who just does it for sport. And sadly, they are out there. But trying to see them and the situation from multiple different perspectives can help soften your reaction to them. As you're going through this, trying to avoid trying to change them. That is going to fan the flames. You can't change them. They're in their lizard brain when they're acting like this. Try to avoid defending yourself or the library policies initially because they're not going to hear you. They're not in a place where that registers. Try to avoid getting drawn in and yelling back and pushing anger back at them. That's going to fan the flames. And this one's hard, but try to avoid judging them. We have no idea what's going on that's triggering this outburst in them. If I can be beige and bring some maturity and grace to the scene, it's going to go more smoothly than if I judge them and that starts showing. and they start picking up on that. Try to avoid nodding because that's encouraging. Try to avoid smiling. They could interpret that as you mocking them. Humor almost always backfires, especially if you don't know the person. When it works, it can work really well, but the chance of it working in this situation is pretty slim. Avoid touching them. That again, if you know the person well and it's appropriate, could work, but generally avoid touching the person. That can be threatening and just fire up their threat response. Try avoiding responding to their chaos. Try responding to facts. So they may exaggerate and say every single time, and it might have really only happened once or twice. And you might say that such and such happened twice, and you're just calmly stating facts. And try to avoid yelling back, because that triggers their fight or flight response. So that was during the confrontation. Now let's move after it. Whether it ended successfully or not, however you define successful, make sure that you debrief. Talk with someone so that hopefully your institution has a policy on how you debrief after something. It would be impossible or unrealistic to think that you can go through this 15-minute scenario with someone yelling at you and then you just calmly turn around and work with the next patron. Ideally, you can talk through it, what went well, what didn't go well, get your emotions out, identify your emotions so that you're not blocking them and causing them to be stuck. Have a way to relieve your stress, whether you take a moment to just walk around the building or the block or go in a back office and do 10 push-ups. Have a way of getting your blood moving and letting that get out of you. Remember, our body can metabolize some of the stress hormones faster if we do something physical. But identifying your emotions and acknowledging the fact that you are stressed is part of that. And then give yourself credit. We're very hard on ourselves. Our brains stick to the negative thoughts, and you'll think of everything you did wrong and how bad the situation was. Give yourself credit. You just survived a very uncomfortable moment. So please notice what you did, and the immediate afterward is about you processing and moving forward. So that is after. If you want to look at preparing for the next time this happens, because there almost always is another time, strategize with your team. Talk about it. Your staff should talk about it. You may need to role play, have someone act like the aggressor, and you each practice with them. Even in a role play, it feels horrible having someone get in your face and their eyes are bugging out and they're yelling horrible things at you and not listening to you. Kind of practicing and building up your skin for that situation can be helpful. Work on learning about emotional intelligence and also de-escalating. I could recommend your libraries have a lot of resources on this. But knowing emotional intelligence involves recognizing my own emotions and reading other people's and knowing how to manage them. And emotional intelligence seems to be lacking a lot these days. If you have some, at least half the party in this confrontation has some. And then manage your self-care. Talk about that. It needs to start yesterday. Start taking care of yourself. When you show up to work hungry and then you get hangry, which is angry and hungry at the same time, it's not a pretty combination. It's not good for you or the work environment. Show up as well rested as you can, taking care of yourself, your mind, body, and your spirit. Make sure you have time for your hobbies, time for your friends, time for laughter. And as I talk about relaxation is not sitting on the couch, zoning out with a beer in one hand and a remote in the other. That can feel good in the moment, but you're really just walling off and denying feeling what it is you're feeling. A relaxation exercise is something that your mind is engaged in. You're not just mindlessly watching figures move on a screen. And that's why meditations or guided imageries or even walking, doing anything mindfully. You can walk mindfully, listening to the sounds outside or listening and feeling how your feet hit the pavement. Making time for that every day is going to be really important. But jumping back to strategizing with your team, depending on your situation, do you need an emergency button in your work area? Do you have plans in place of if somebody is having a confrontation, who would be the person who could maybe physically stand in that area just as support? And you don't want them to be yelling back at the person either, because that triggers the threat response when they feel like there's two people ganging up on them. But make a plan with your team. It's going to happen someday, if not every day. How is your team going to work together to prepare for this? I like to mention that also preparing to emit the best emotions you can is helpful. And this goes back actually in the moment you can do this. You can do this several times a day, even in a non-stressful moment. But think of somebody or something you love, whether you can conjure that image up in your head or you need to look at a photo on your phone. That creates the feeling of comfort and love and safety, and that is going to shift your emotions, and that is going to be what you radiate out. So in the moment, can you, and this takes practice, can you conjure up someone you love and get that love feeling going and practice sending that out to the world? Got to mention, what if it's you? What if you are the prickly person? What if you are the unreasonable person here? How can you then begin to manage your pain and your stress? You could work on building social connections. You could work on your emotional intelligence. You can consider therapy if it's a diagnosable problem. If it's an emotional intelligence issue, there are coaches who work on that and help you become more aware of how you are perceived in the world. You can establish routines if it's stress and overwhelm that is causing some of your prickly outbursts. Having routines, streamlining processes takes some of the overwhelm out of your head and calms you down, and that could be enough of a solution. But if you find that you are always involved in the unreasonable situations, we do need to step back and maybe look, is it me? Am I a trigger here for this stuff? Am I promoting it? As uncomfortable as that can be. So a question to think about, wrapping it up. We talked about the 6 secrets. We talked about the brain, some emotions, how to stay calm and stress. Did you learn something that can improve your effectiveness as you're working with unreasonable people? 1 to 4. 1 is not at all. 2 is maybe. 3 is yes, I need to practice it though. 4 is definitely, I feel much more confident about it. I want you to write that number down. 1 to 4, 4 is high. Did you learn something today that can improve your effectiveness in working with an unreasonable patron? And then if you'd like to put in the chat what it was you learned, great, do that. And then we can all see what everybody is learning. So coming back to wrap up with 6 things to know. 6 things when you're dealing with the unreasonable patron. Don't ignore the situation because it's not going to go away on its own. Try to stay calm. Go beige. Lead the conversation. You're leading it toward a solution, so you're focusing on a solution, and find a single point that you agree on as you're wrapping toward the solution. I thank you for coming today. My contact information, I will be on answering questions as you're watching this on March 15th, and I'll see you there.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing this today, and thank you to everyone who attended the webinar. If you have any questions, as Laura just mentioned, you can feel free to reach out using the Whova app. You can talk with other attendees. You can talk with Laura. You can talk with us as hosts. So feel free to reach out that way. And an evaluation is provided with the conference session resources. So we welcome your feedback about this specific session and about the conference in general. So thank you everyone for making the 2023 Southeast Collaborative Online Conference successful, and we will see you all next year.
Thank you.